The vaccine rollout passes 30 million as England prepares to reopen again. The end of the pandemic might just be looming into sight, but ministers warn we must not squander it now.
Thank goodness we can start to see the beginning of the end of this, but it is just the beginning.
Also on the programme, the UN leads the condemnation of military forces in Myanmar after unarmed civilians are killed. Still stuck, but for how much longer? More than 300 ships wait in line at the Suez Canal. And Franzoy, the mother whose council house shocked the nation, is finally moved into a new home.
I actually checked it when I came. I was like, oh no, mold, no leak, oh my God, luck.
This is ITV News with Lucrezia Millarini.
Good evening. There was another big and positive moment in the long road out of the pandemic today as the government confirmed the vaccine programme had passed the 30 million mark. It comes on the eve of lockdown restrictions being lifted in England. From tomorrow, families will be able to reunite and friends can meet outside again. Though most will be looking forward to their newfound freedom, ministers are warning us not to squander what has been gained so far. Lucy Watson has the details.
The route towards normality is on course. The sights and sounds of what is familiar and fun are coming back, and businesses are feeling relieved.
Excited. It's good to get back and get out and fresh air. Fully booked from 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. The weather's supposed to be good, so very happy.
March the 29th signals the end of lockdown for us all, whether you're a business or a bride. Oliver and Danielle only decided 5 weeks ago to get married as soon as rules would allow.
We don't have any of the stress of a wedding, I don't feel. I don't think we've got any of the nerves that a lot of couples say that they have. We've just got the excitement.
Because from tomorrow, weddings like theirs can go ahead with up to 6 attending. People can meet outside again in groups of 6 or as 2 households. Organised outdoor sports can restart, and outdoor sports facilities like tennis courts, golf courses and swimming pools will reopen. Freedom is fast approaching. The vaccine rollout has hit the 30 million mark and the R rate remains below 1. But that did increase slightly over the past week, showing that there's no room for complacency. We are, of course, being urged to act cautiously because coronavirus rates in Europe have started to increase.
It is just the beginning, so it's essential that people stick to the rules so you can meet friends and family outside as long as you abide by the rule of 6 or 2 households. You can engage in the outdoor sports, and I'd encourage people to do that because it's so good for our health. But don't push the rules, stick by the rules.
When we've done that, can we make sure the bag...
Preparations are underway ahead of the most meaningful change to personal liberties in 3 months. But as well as optimism, there is apprehension.
If everybody's still socially distancing and being sensible, then I'm just really excited to start living life again.
I think life has changed. I think we'll all have to be a bit more careful, and I'm guessing social distancing.
Life has changed, but we are moving forwards, just gently. Lucy Watson, ITV News, Welwyn Garden City.
Our political reporter Hannah Miller is here. So, Hannah, a vaccine milestone, more than 30 million first jabs, but is the rollout still on track?
Well, to put that number in context, Lucrezia, it's about 57% of adults have now had their first dose of the vaccine. You realise, though, how far we still have to go when you hear it's only about 6% have had 2 doses. There's going to be a strong push in the next few weeks to crack on with those second doses. The government insists we are still on track to meet all of their targets. They will no doubt be helped by the arrival of the new Moderna vaccine, which we heard from ministers today. They hope will be going into arms in the next few weeks by the end of April.
And also, Hannah, a change to the rules for some people coming back into the country.
Yes, Grant Shapps, the Transport Secretary, announcing that lorry drivers, cabin crew, seasonal workers coming from outside the UK and staying for more than 2 days will be expected to take a COVID test within the first 48 hours and then every 3 days after that. He says the aim is to keep track of the so-called variants of concern, those versions of COVID which it's thought might be a bit more resistant to the vaccine. But the testing requirement doesn't come in until a week on Tuesday, April the 6th. That's drawn criticism from the Labour MP Yvette Cooper, chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee, who says it's one of several significant gaps in the plan. There is this sense that we've gone from being a country that poses a risk to others to other countries now posing a risk to us. This move today from the Transport Secretary, an attempt to keep control of our own roadmap. Some just don't believe, though, that it still goes far enough.
Hannah, thank you. While much of today's news is positive, for many, the pandemic will leave lasting emotional scars. Today, the country's largest bereavement charity reported a huge rise in calls. Cruise Bereavement Care says it's seen a 68% increase in the number of people asking for help. As Rebecca Barry reports, social restrictions have left many loved ones alone and isolated.
Two women, strangers, yet now united in their grief. We brought them together to talk about their shared trauma.
There was nothing we could do for him, nothing. And he cried like a baby.
Zahara's husband, Sahel, died in October. He was 49 and leaves 2 teenage children.
He was then put into an induced coma. And anyway, he was in the coma for maybe a week. We were allowed to go in and see him and say our goodbyes to him.
Vicky's husband, Kevin, died almost a year ago. He was 47.
He called me from hospital saying that, thank you, saying that he weren't going to make it. But Kevin he joked all the time. So I thought at the start he was joking. It just didn't feel real, it was so fast. It went from him being taken in an ambulance on the Thursday to Friday been gone.
The bereavement charity Cruise saw an enormous 68% rise in calls for help last year, pain and shock exacerbated by lockdown.
When you've lost someone, you just want a hug. I think you just want to fall into somebody and hug them, don't you? And we haven't been able to have, still not been able to have that, have we yet? And it's difficult.
Not the goodbyes anyone could prepare for.
Not what we saw and not how we saw it, the degradation of this illness and not the devastation of what my children witnessed. Not like that. Not like that at all.
The view with the mask, that's the thing that stays in my head, that mask.
People are really willing to help you. They are, don't close yourself from it. You need to just reach out.
Accept the help.
Yeah.
Each life lost to COVID leaves a web of suffering. Perhaps there's some comfort that they're not alone. Rebecca Barry, ITV News.
And if you would like details of the help and support available to people who are grieving, head to our website, itv.com/news. Thankfully, the coronavirus numbers here in Britain appear to be heading in the right direction, but that isn't the case everywhere. India, the world's second most populous nation with more than 1.3 billion people, is in the grip of a second wave. Just last month, cases had fallen as low as 11,000 per day, but now daily infections are on the rise, topping 60,000 for the first time in more than 5 months. And as our senior international correspondent John Irvine explains, it has come as thousands of people are coming together for mass celebrations.
It's festival time in India, a celebration of spring and new beginnings. But this year there's fear too that in the fight against COVID, caution is being thrown to the wind. Gatherings at the Ganges have been curtailed, but the potential pitfalls are obvious. However, for some pilgrims dipping in the river, faith trumps any reservations they might have.
Currently, people have more belief than any fear of corona.
India is paying the price for dropping its guard. The daily rise in cases has just topped 60,000 for the first time in almost 6 months. So severe is the second wave that holy men making the riverbank pilgrimage have faith in the country's vaccination program as well as the Hindu gods. Roughly 53 million Indians have received at least one dose, but in a country of 1.4 billion, those already protected are thinly spread.
As a percentage of the total population, the Indian coverage still remains relatively low compared to some of the high incidence countries globally. So while India has not been slow in the initiation of it, India will be planning to scale it up faster.
For devotees, immersion in the river is atonement, a cleansing of the soul. To many Hindus, it's an integral part of their way of life.
COVID is a scenario which is not going to be there for weeks or months, it's going to take years. So one cannot close their lives. We have to start understanding and start living with COVID with due precautions.
Experts fear that India's second wave might not peak for another month. The vaccine just isn't being doled out fast enough to check the climb in COVID numbers.
We are doing a level best, but yes, we are appealing to the citizens also. This is their responsibility also, apart from health department administration, they must follow the COVID-19 appropriate behaviors.
A sluggish vaccine rollout, combined with a lapse in precautions being taken, does not bode well. John Irvine, ITV News.
Protesters in Myanmar put their lives at risk again today as they return to streets where some of their friends had been killed only hours earlier. The killing of more than 100 unarmed civilians by Myanmar security forces has drawn global outrage, with the UN calling for an international emergency summit. Well, more than 400 people have now been killed since the military coup on February the 1st. Paul Davis reports.
Despite all attempts at bloody suppression, the anti-coup protesters were back on the streets this morning. This act of defiance particularly brave, as the streets of Yangon, where they're marching, were the scene of slaughter yesterday. Ignoring the growing clamour of protest from around the world, the Myanmar military again turned its guns on its own people. Facing live rounds, the demonstrators only had stones to reply. One launched a firework. It was a futile gesture on a dark day for democracy. There is only ever going to be one winner when civilians armed only with gestures come up against troops prepared to use lethal force. With similar unarmed protest put down with similar ruthlessness in major cities like Mandalay, the death toll ran into 3 figures.
It bears repeating that these aren't just protesters being killed, it's bystanders. There was even a child shot dead in their home the other day. So this is a military operating with total impunity. It's just absolutely unacceptable.
It's not only on the streets brave people are taking risks to speak out against the military. Han Lei, Miss Myanmar, used a beauty pageant to do the same.
Today, in my country, Myanmar, why I dream to be on this day, there are so many people dying, more than 100 people dying today.
One of those who died was Ma Shui Mint, a mother of 4 shot dead yesterday. Today at her funeral there were tears, but there was also defiance. Mourners raising their hands in the 3-finger salute that's become the symbol of opposition to Myanmar's generals. Paul Davis, ITV News.
Salvage experts say they're hoping tonight's full moon and high tide will allow them to finally shift the giant container ship that's been stuck in Egypt's Suez Canal for 5 days. Some progress has been made using diggers and tugboats, but with the Ever Given still blocking the route, there's now a backlog of more than 300 vessels. Neil Connery has the latest.
Stuck in the Suez Canal, going nowhere fast, the Ever Given and its 220,000 tonnes of cargo. 12% of world trade passes through here, but not since her bow grounded on Tuesday. Tugboats have tried to refloat the ship, and 20,000 tonnes of sand were dredged yesterday. In its wake, the most expensive of traffic jams builds, the delay holding up an estimated £7 billion of goods each day. Round-the-clock efforts continue, but the force of the ship's load, wedged into the sand below, has defeated all attempts so far.
When they're on the land, the friction stops it moving completely. So you need a massive force to try and move that. And as we dig out the bank, as we dredge the sand away and pull it little bit by little bit with these tugs, it really is going to be a very big job.
The 400-metre-long container ship has now been stuck 3 miles north of Port Suez for 6 days. More than 300 vessels, north and south, are waiting for the Ever Given to be moved. Some ships have already diverted around South Africa, which will add another 2 weeks. If it's stuck much longer, others will have to decide whether to follow suit.
There's some reports today that the vessel has been moved somewhat, but in all fairness, the tides haven't really been working in their favour. So over the coming days, we're expecting higher spring tides, which means that the tide height will be at the highest point that it will be, which will essentially mean that the vessel has more buoyancy. The ground reaction onto the bank will be smaller, and therefore the tugs should have a better chance of pulling the vessel off.
But if those efforts fail to refloat the ship, this has the potential to drag on for some time, with serious consequences for trade being felt potentially far and wide. Neil Connery, ITV News.
Tomorrow, the former police officer accused of murdering George Floyd will go on trial in Minneapolis. Many in the city are beyond are looking for a verdict, not just on one man, but on the wider policing system and its use of force. As our US correspondent Emma Murphy reports, the expectations of a divided nation are riding on the outcome.
Bro, look, well, you should check on him. He's not responsive right now. Back off!
Those who witnessed George Floyd on the ground beneath the knee of a police officer were clear what they thought was happening.
He's not responsive right now, bro.
Does he have a pulse?
No, bro, look at him. He's not responsive right now, bro.
They could hear Mr. Floyd pleading for breath. They could see the life ebbing from him.
Is he breathing right now? Check his pulse.
And they warned that in front of them all, a man was dying.
Check his pulse, bro.
Tomorrow, the judgment will move from the street to the court. A jury will be asked to begin considering their judgment of this man, former police officer Derek Chauvin. Did holding his knee on George Floyd's neck for more than 8 minutes constitute murder, manslaughter, or neither? This area is now known as George Floyd Square. Almost a year on, flowers are still laid in memory of a man whose death challenged and still challenges the United States.
We don't really want to talk about the trial, focus on the trial, let it play out how it's supposed to play out, and hopefully it goes how it's supposed to go. If I do that or you do that, you're going to jail. So why would it not be that way for somebody else that did it, just because he has a badge?
The hearing here in Minneapolis is set to be one of the most divisive in the American justice system. For many, justice itself is on trial in a case where every moment leading to George Floyd's death is captured on camera. For the prosecution, this was murder in plain sight. The protests which followed George Floyd's death sparked civil unrest not seen since Martin Luther King's assassination. They spread across the world. I can't breathe, an international slogan of outrage. At 9 tomorrow morning, amid high security, a jury must begin to determine a case which has significant long-term implications for this country and those who live in it. Emma Murphy, ITV News, Minneapolis.
The government has rejected a request for £170 million in financial support for Liberty Steel. The company told the government last week that help was needed to pay operating expenses and deal with recent losses. It employs around 5,000 workers at a number of sites across the UK. Concerns over the future of the company have been expressed after a key financial backer went bust. And a number of delivery workers are to go on strike next month over pay and health and safety concerns. The announcement follows last week's revelations that riders can earn as little as £2 an hour. On Monday, we brought you the shocking story of the council tenants stuck in a house of horrors in Croydon. Leaking ceilings, mouldy walls and unsafe electrics led to one charity describing the block in Croydon as the worst they'd ever seen. Well, tonight, there's been some good news for one of the tenants we featured, and our political correspondent Daniel Hewitt first brought us the story, and he joins us now. Daniel, talk us through what's happened.
Yes, Lucrezia, our investigation uncovered the most squalid conditions these residents in one tower block in Croydon, South London, were living in. These conditions were being ignored when they were complaining to their their landlord, Croydon Council, time and time again. As you say, the conditions with black mould all over their flats, their ceilings leaking, their carpets completely flooded, residents, including children, living at potential risk of electrocution, and their complaints were ignored time and time again. Croydon Council has since apologised and admitted to a committee of MPs this week a complete corporate failure in the way it handled those complaints. Now, one of those residents, Franzoy Hewitt, living with her two sons, aged 5 and 7, was moved into a hotel 24 hours after ITV News revealed these pictures to Croydon Council. They've been there for a week. This weekend, though, they've been told that Franzoy, for the first time, has been given a permanent council home, a two-bed council home. She got the keys this weekend. She'll be moving in tomorrow. This is what she said earlier when we went and spoke to her.
It feels amazing. I actually can't believe it. It's like I'm not going to Regina Road. I'm somewhere else. It feels great. I actually checked it when I came. I was like, oh, no mold, no leak. Oh my God, luck.
Well, Daniel, good news for Franzoy there. What about the other people in the block?
Yes, well, Leroy also featured in our report. Leroy McNally, he's currently in a hotel still. He's hoping for a temporary bedsit. He wants to go back to Regina Road. It's been his home for almost 20 years. We know, though, that Leroy and Franzoy are by no means on their own here. We know of other residents in Croydon, but we know this is just not Croydon. Our investigation has found examples from across the country of people living in poor conditions. We know from government data 500,000 people are living in substandard housing. It shouldn't take us to reveal this stuff. There's serious questions here for local and national government.
All right, Daniel, thank you. Sport now. Lewis Hamilton kicked off the defence of his Formula One title with a thrilling win under the lights in Bahrain. He was challenged all the way by Red Bull's Max Verstappen, leading to a nail-biting final lap with the two less than a second apart. But Hamilton held off his rival to claim his first opening race win for 6 years. He later described it as one of the hardest races he's faced in recent times. England's footballers enjoyed a comfortable victory in their World Cup qualifying match in Albania this evening. Gareth Southgate's side enjoyed a 2-0 victory, with Mason Mount sealing the win just after the hour mark. Meanwhile, Scotland came from behind to secure a point against Israel. Ryan Fraser levelled the visitors for their second successive draw in the World Cup qualifiers. Finally, England's cricketers came agonisingly close to pulling off a stunning series win against India. The tourists needed 330 to win the deciding game in Pune and looked like they'd be easily beaten at 200 for 7. But as Chris Scudder reports, all-rounder Sam Curran and some woeful Indian fielding almost led to a famous victory.
A nail-biting climax to a thrilling series, and with some help in the field, England came close to an unlikely victory. Their run chase looked a lost cause when young Sam Curran chanced his arm, but time and again India messed up their lines. All dropped. Same fielder, Hardik Pandya, same result. Curran didn't come in till number 8 when England were on the ropes, but the 22-year-old cleared them 3 times with some defiant hitting. His previous highest England score of 15 was left behind.
And goes for 6. Wonderful hitting from Sam Curran.
With wickets running out, fast bowler Mark Wood joined the fight.
Oh, it's gone down.
The fielders simply couldn't hang on to anything.
Oh, down it goes, Natarajan.
But Pandya, the man who dropped 2 of the easiest catches, made amends with a brilliant throw from the deep, and Wood was run out.
I think he's gone.
After getting so close, the pair was shattered. Curran finished 95 not out, but ultimately England fell 7 runs short of their target. The end of a gruelling tour and a third series defeat. Chris Scudder, ITV News.
And that is it. The weather is up next, but from me and all the weekend team, good night.